Hello.
Hello, Keith. You've answered.
Yeah, hi, Declan. Yeah, I got your message.
Excellent. Okay to let the cleaner in then?
Yeah. I can't see anybody around, but I'll put the thing on the latch. So at the moment I hear, I can go and let them in.
Okay, he'll be in at 10 o'clock.
Oh, right, okay. Not just yet then.
Not just, 10 o'clock you'll be in.
Okay.
I'm going to go to Brighton just to do a very small electrical job and come back.
Okay, I'll look after him.
All right, I'll see you in a bit then, Keith.
Okay, cheers. Bye. Right, okay. You just heard a nice conversation between myself and the Chief of Staff. Mystery solved. Declan is phoning to make sure the cleaner could get in. And that's quite right, too, because the cleaners, most of you know Ada, who is leaving us shortly. The cleaners are the very soul of this pub. They keep it neat and trim and nice and pleasant to drink in, to work in, to play in. Wow, yes, it's a good pub. It does throw me when we get out of kilter, and why it should, I have no idea. I'm a sensitive little soul, must be. Right, okay. So we're back on course. We are back on course, and I'm let's go to the weather. Never mind the weather as long as we're together. Today it's going to be 18 degrees, 2 degrees cooler than it was yesterday. They're going to have some light rain. We had sunshine all day yesterday. And this light winds. So that's the weather for today. And the weather for tomorrow is that we're going to get some thunderstorms. It's going to be even a little bit cooler yet. It'll be Saturday before we perk up again. But then it's going to go up to 18 degrees and we're going to have a sunshiny day. But there's not a great deal of joy in the offing, although it's going to hover next week around about 20 degrees, which isn't bad, I guess. It's just not full sunshine. Right you are. Okie dokie. What's for tea? Booze everywhere and not a drop to drink. So you think having a key to a pub first thing in the morning is a great bonus to you? Not in the least. Declan Rowell, who is the chief of staff but also the landlord of this pub, rules it with an iron fist. I don't get 1 ounce more, 1 drop more than my quota, and only when he says I can have it. Talk about tough. Oh, my goodness me. But it's there. So I quote, is it Samuel Coleridge? Drink everywhere, but not a drop to touch. You can see it over my shoulder. Now, we don't really know quite what we're going to do today. We've been thrown off course. And I think that one of the things that we, you know, this business of the contaminated blood, it in itself is a tragedy. But, you know, we fight like hell at this station, even with our limited resources and our limited people. We fight like hell to make sure that we get a sense of justice, that we have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Yes, we need to have some curbs. We can't just open up the doors and let people go and do anything they want. I had some example of that in some of my dealings overseas. I think it was in Armenia. I was approached by a group of journalists who said, would I please teach them how to do leaders, how to do opinion pieces? And I said, yes, I would, but I had to warn them that because Eastern Europeans have a tendency to think that freedom of expression, freedom of the media, freedom of speech is that you can say anything that you want, when you want, how you want, about who you want. They don't realize that freedom has to come with responsibility. And you can't just flail your hands and call somebody a prat when you just because you think he is. You need to prove that point before you actually start to wag your tongue. Why did I start to tell you that? Because of the blood scandal, we have a tendency to close ourselves down so that we don't say anything to anybody. And there is nothing worse than governance for that. And this station, this television operation, is dedicated to making sure that if any information is hidden from the public, is held close to the chest of our leaders, that they have a very good reason for doing that. Not just because they feel that it might embarrass them, or they didn't feel like telling you, or in their view, it's not for your eyes. Open government means an open society. Open society means a good democracy. A good democracy means healthy government. A healthy government means that, generally speaking, most things go in favor of the citizen. A closed government leads to secrecy, suspicion, a burning desire to rip information out of people, whether it's justified or not. And ultimately, a society that is chaotic and not working on behalf of the citizen. And yet, it's amazing. It's amazing knowing that, and we do know it, how governance attempts to say as little as possible and hide as much as it can. And here is a prime example. The blood scandal, a prime example of the consequences that can arise from secrecy. And yet, we have secrecy in our own backyard. all three councils are very reluctant to hand out a good deal of information. The sense of self-importance of being a councillor. I wouldn't be one. I'd be ashamed to say that I was a councillor nowadays. The implication, in my view, is exactly the image that they give. Pompous, secretive, arrogant, closed. All those things we can ascribe to all three levels of governance. It's not just one particular one. And this blood scandal is exactly dramatic. Yes, it is. But it is the sort of thing that can result from being secretive. And that's why we are against anything that cuts down on information from the state to the electorate. There is no justification. And we must not make a justification for keeping or for officialdom to keep citizens in the dark. Maybe there's the odd occasion, for instance, where a spy could easily be revealed, one of our spies, and therefore face a fatal end, let's put it that way. Perhaps there is the odd thing that, yes, everybody should not know, only a few. But there's a very fine line in deciding that. And we need to ensure that the balance is fair and just, and that it is in the interests of everybody. That is not happening at the moment. It is not happening. And as a consequence, confidence in our leadership is at a very lowest ebb, right throughout the system. I hope that some local people aren't sitting there brimming and saying, the Tories have got it wrong, or Labour have got it wrong, or whatever. And we are pure as pure, because you're not. You behave just like the big boys, and you ain't big boy. So there is a signal lesson to be learned. And it's time that our society started to take a more positive interest in what's going on around us and not pulling down statues and barricading Parliament. All those things which look so colourful and masterful, which are not in the best interests of society generally. We need to rethink this. Perhaps out of, what did it say in the Bible? Out of strength comes forth goodness, or comes forth sweetness. Perhaps out of this tragedy will come forward a different approach, a different attitude towards freedom of information, freedom of movement, freedom of thought, because we have gone rapidly downhill in the last couple of years or so, and we need to bring it back. We need to bring it back. And those people who are critical of the media, think twice. Think on it. It's not all the fault of the media, which is a popular refrain nowadays. The media can be society's best friend, with a sense of responsibility on both sides. It's not just a one-way street. Wow. It's 9:01. An hour of complete havoc. Everything has gone wrong that possibly can go wrong. I just had a feeling that it was. Don't ask me why. I get a feeling in my bones. It's and it all goes wrong. It all goes wrong. And I'm happy to say that fresh off the loo is. Are you feeling better?
Well, I'm feeling better. I'm not spending as much time in the loo as I did into yesterday. I can't say I feel brilliant, but there's no point me going on about feeling rubbish when given how steadfast and stoical you are.
Well, you are always welcome, of course, and of course you're now a staple diet of Mirador. People feel denied if they don't have a little taste of you. And the fact that you were making the odd comment yesterday in the comment column is helped enormously.
Yeah,
but
well,
I'm glad you're here in the flesh.
I checked in to see if Liza was on, and boy, was she on. My first message was that she was talking about a hospice, not a hostel. You know, she couldn't remember the word for where people go with terminal illness to die, so she called it a hostel. So my first message, which you didn't pick up on, was that, and that's just a fact, not a complaint, was hospice. But then I sent the one you did see. I thought she was terrific.
She was full of bear yesterday, that's for sure. Yes.
Well, that's the first time I've realised why you used to wear a tin hat. Because whenever I've seen her before, she's been like a lamb, and I'm thinking, why is Keith cowering in the background and sort of cringing as if he's about to get duffed up? I think it's, silly old codger. But no, yesterday I realised why.
Well, she has very firm convictions. As I say to her that I give her full esteem, full reign, because she does have such convictions. she accepts the fact that that I sometimes need to be a counterbalance. She can get carried away, but boy, do you pay attention to her?
Yeah, she's very eloquent. I didn't catch the bit where she was with Harry for a while. I didn't get that. Well, I missed that. But no, she was very good value.
Yes, actually, pulling them away from one another is a problem.
Well, you see, you compliment me on my rapport with Harry. It's not just me. Both Liza, as is obvious, and you know, he could be with anybody, you know, and I would leave it flexible, quite frankly.
Yes. Well, actually, it's developing that way, and I'm delighted it is, because we are all interchangeable.
Yes, well, I mean, I'd rather not have to guarantee being on a Monday at 10 o'clock. I'd rather, particularly with you around and hopefully Liza again, I'd rather just pop in when I feel like it, when I can. You know, subject to the eternal caveat that if there are days you just don't feel like doing anything, I can step in if you'd like me to.
Yes. Oh. Well, I actually, as I've discussed briefly with you, there are certain key pegs. I mean, Harry at 10 o'clock on a Monday,
Yes.
Melissa at 10:30 on a Friday, and so on, various people throughout the week. John Prideaux at 9 o'clock once every other week, and so on. But in between time, we are now becoming a band of interesting people who pop in and out as the spirit moves us and as the topic moves us. And
yes, well,
it's proving to be a good formula.
We're wandering minstrels, many of us, aren't we?
We are.
I don't know whether you realise, but when I picked up on you being back live this morning on Facebook, I thought the caption was hilarious. Fumblebum's back.
Yes.
That's why I came on, really, because I realised you were having a bit of a bad time. When I read Fumblebum, I really liked that. That was very funny. You can't beat a bit of self-deprecation, Keith.
Yeah. I was all fingers and thumbs a little earlier.
Well, I was listening to what was supposed to be Tall Tales, and
yes.
I could hear this other voice, but all I could see was you.
Yes. I had no idea what I'd done with the source of that story.
Yeah. And then you decided to take 5, very sensibly.
Well, I needed to get the system back operating. I had no idea where anything was. No. But strangely enough, I just got that feeling when I started this morning, because I apologized for the cock-ups before we even started, and before I'd even made them.
Well, that's slightly over anticipatory, Keith. You know, aren't you sort of begging for the cock-ups, because people will be waiting for them, and actually you make very few. Given the amount of hours you put in with Mirador going out 5 days a week, there are very, very few Fumblebums.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way. You're always very aware when you've done something stupid.
I know that because I've done it myself. But it took me ages to realise that I had to come off Bluetooth to be heard properly on Mirador on the iPad. You know, you live and learn. But So today's Tuesday. Who else have you got coming on, do you think?
I haven't got anybody at the moment. I've put out a general note because I normally have Mark Maybe on, and he was in London yesterday, and he went to catch his train back, only to be greeted with an announcement that it had been cancelled because of lack of staff.
No,
You know,
the journeys he does, I can only empathise, because that West Coast line is a bloody nightmare, absolute nightmare, because the trains he gets carry on to my hometown of Stockport and then into Manchester Piccadilly. And they have had staff shortages for as long as I can remember. And the great shame is they are using this state of the art. They call them Pandolino trains. And because it's all electric, they don't have the weight of the engine. Now, you were talking about the Japanese bullet train. Now, that's far quicker than what we have. But these Pendolinos are really fast when they get going. And when they're on form, the journey time from Euston to Manchester is something ludicrous, like 2 hours 20 on the faster ones. I mean, when you think that it takes me or my wife or whoever, if we travel up to see the kids in London, it takes us 1 hour and 50 minutes to get to Victoria, yet you can get from Euston to Piccadilly in under 2.5 hours, let's put it that way. You're there in the flash. You've only just settled down and they're announcing you've gone through Macclesfield.
yeah.
But they just can't run the service properly. They just can't run it.
There is no question that there is a skill called management. I don't have it, and I wish I did, but I just can't generate the sort of skills required. And I'm full of admiration for people that can. But if a train company, with all its importance, hasn't got good managers, then it's going to fail.
It is going to fail, and it's not the only franchise that is failing. The fact that Labour, if they get in, which is a when, not an if, sadly, if they were to keep their promises, which they never do, about renationalising the railways, I'd be all in favour of that. Because they're run purely for the shareholders.
Yeah.
Purely for the shareholders. I mean, a train guard, which is what I still call them, they call them all sorts of names now, onboard supervisors and things like that. A guard once told me, he said, "Do you realise, sir," he said, not one penny of the fares you pay go to this train company. It all goes to the government. And they pay a subsidy. So whenever they put the fares up, which they do every year, again, all they're doing is increasing the amount of money that goes into the government coffers.
Yes.
For the government to decide how it's dished out.
Yes.
And primarily to the shareholders.
Yes. I mean, I think that rather than take money from every source the way they do, and people say, "Well, you've got to pay for government," we should cut the number of people in governance to the bone. Is we don't need a shocking figure, something like in a year, civil service has increased by 6,000 people. Or
Yeah,
something.
well,
yeah,
this is what Harry goes on about, and he gets his statistics. I'm in no doubt they're more or less accurate. But as he's told us, it's even worse in France. The bureaucracy in France. But his point is a valid one. That these are people who've no idea what it's like at the coalface. You know,
that's right.
As another railway employee said to me about Southern Railways, same with the civil servants. They couldn't run a tap.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
They couldn't run a tap.
Now, let me switch a little bit, because you must be feeling your oats with your team having set a historic record in terms of league wins.
Yes, well, the best headline was, of all papers, the Daily Star, and it was a play on the word euphoric. So it was you-for-ic. Yeah, I mean, of course I was relieved. I mean, mates say to me, you know, do you still get really, really happy about this, or are you just so used now to it that it doesn't matter? I said neither. Supporting City, as I have since 1967, or some say the late 60s, it's hardwired into you that you're going to fail, because for decades they were pants, absolute pants. And every time I get ahead of myself with these so-called achievements, I go back on YouTube and I watch the highlights of the 1999 playoff final for the third tier and remind myself, because I was there that day, and it was because of a 96th minute equaliser by a player called Paul Dickov that allowed us to equalise late in the game. Nobody scored in extra time, and we ended up winning the playoff final on penalties. It was the most gut-wrenching, emotional day I think I've ever had at a football match. So I have to remind myself. And of course, the other problem is, it's all very well, the accolades, you know, the treble, which was wonderful, potentially the double this coming weekend, and even better, beating Manchester United. But in the background, there's one huge elephant in the room, and that is the financial fair play accusations of breaching their regulations, which means that if those charges are proven, everything goes. They take all this stuff off us. It will be as if it's never happened.
Yes.
And on programs like Match of the Day, where you get a lot of ex-players, as you know, they're saying how unfair this is on the players, because they've done nothing wrong. All they have done is achieve, and achieve greatly. How are they going to feel where their medals are taken away from them if it happens? But nobody's saying when these hearings are going to take place. This has been on the back burner for 2 seasons now. So there's that shadow hanging over the club.
Right.
And that is classic Man City, believe me. There's always something. There's always something. I mean, on Sunday, I was beside myself. I couldn't watch the game because it was on Sky. I can't afford Sky. or for that matter, the old BT Sport. That's become ludicrously expensive. They've changed the name to TNT for some reason. They obviously think it's rather explosive, but it's not. It's really quite boring, BT Sports. Anyway, enough of that. So all I could do was follow the games, the Arsenal game and the City game in particular, on what's called Final Score. You may know what Final Score is. It's a BBC iPlayer programme that comes out live, and it starts at kick-off time, which on Sunday for the Premier League was 4 o'clock. And that's how I followed the progress of the two teams. So at the time when City were 2-0 up and appeared to be coasting, Arsenal were 1 down against Everton at the Emirates. I'm thinking, we've done this, but no. What then happens is Arsenal equalise, West Ham get a goal back, have another one disallowed for offside, and I'm thinking this is going to be a repeat of the Aguero season, going back to our first Premiership title in, I think, 13, when he scored in the 97th minute to beat a Queen's Park Rangers side who nearly beat us. And it would have given United the title. So I'm thinking, this is happening again. And it was only when the third goal went in, nearer the end, that although Arsenal were then 2-1 up, I actually thought, unusually, to myself, even we can't cock this up now. So, you know, because the modern fans, the youngsters, they know nothing but success. You know, they're like the old United fans, who knew nothing but success under Ferguson. You know, I've got a very, very close friend down here. He's also my car mechanic. Great bloke. Known him for 35 years. You know, proper lifelong United fan. Albeit from Sussex. And he said to me, he said, Phil, what your fans do now reminds me of what we used to do under Ferguson. He said, I would go in a sports bar or to a friend's house and I'd watch a United game and it wouldn't be, are we going to lose this? Oh no, it would be, how many goals are we going to score? He said, now I'm like you used to be. I go to the sports bar and persevere watching United, and I just think, just avoid losing, guys, you know, because you're rubbish. Just, you know, don't concede as many as you should, and you know. So for him, the things completely flipped. But I just can't get used to how good we actually are. I mean, let's not forget, Real Madrid knocked us out of the Champions League by a whisker. That was on penalties. And Real Madrid are looking to win it again this year. The final's at Wembley. And as ever with Madrid, they've got a really lucky break because they're playing the minnows, Dortmund from Germany, who everybody is absolutely astonished even got through the group stages, but they're in the final. So if I were a betting man, which I'm not, Madrid will wipe the floor with them. I mean, they've got wonderful players and they've got a fantastic manager. Ancelotti is the dog's testicles when it comes to managers. You know, he's brilliant. So yeah, Sunday was interesting. And then we've got the cup final this Saturday.
Yes.
against United. And you see, in a one-off game like a final, form goes out the window, Keith.
Yes, it does. Emotion and
Yeah,
a sense of occasion takes over. But tell me, this talk. I mean, I'm not a dyed-in-the-wool football man, but I am disappointed and upset at this talk by the wealthy clubs of perhaps opting out of the cup final. That it is not worthwhile. That it hasn't got the magic. To me, it's the main game of the season.
well, City don't feel that way. What I thought you were going to mention, which I think is an absolute travesty, is that they're going to scrap replays.
Yes.
And they're going to go ahead with that. And for the smaller clubs, the so-called lesser clubs, that's going to be very bad news. Because if you can force a replay at your opponent's big ground, or fill your own ground with a replay, and you get the television cameras there, it's manna from heaven.
Absolutely.
For the so-called lesser clubs. And so what they'll do is they'll scrap replays, they'll go for extra time, and then penalties. And
yes.
the so-called lesser players, they won't have the quality, I'm afraid, to take quality penalties. But yeah, so that's a sadness. Just changing the subject completely, but back to Mark Maybe. I emailed him over the weekend before I started to live in the toilet. Because that story he told about being beaten up in Wembley absolutely haunted me. Of all the cases, of all the things I've come across in my career, there he is, dressed smartly, in Wembley, on his way to work, and two thugs in hoodies. I won't share the colour of their skin, but I think you can guess. Rob him and then beat him up for good measure, including kicking his teeth out. I mean, it's horrendous. And then the cops tell him not to dress smartly.
Yeah.
Because they know there are these predators around about which they can and do nothing. So, and you know, his own hometown of Stoke now, what he calls the dust monkeys. He now drives to the station.
Yeah.
He used to walk, which is better for you. Now he drives. So I emailed him just to say how affected I was and how much I sympathised with that ordeal he went through, because it really disgusted me.
Yes, and I think, to be quite honest with you, the police are operating in the context of a rather soft society. But you know, as Harry has said, you know, Britain continues to slowly move to the left, whereas the rest of Europe starts to move to the right. I think that there's going to be a rude awakening pretty soon, and the reality of the situation is going to come home. And we mentioned in that conversation at some stage zero tolerance.
Yeah.
And there was a television series called The Chief, which was absolutely fascinating. And it was about the chief of police of Washington, D.C. And he was a zero policy man. And he managed to get around him a team of little loyal people to help him overcome some of the problems. But generally speaking, most people were against him. And some of the difficulties that you have in changing a culture. But I think that we are going to have to go back to zero tolerance because it's gone too far the other way.
I don't think we ever have had zero tolerance because it's very un-British. But when Melissa is next on, one of us must ask her, because she will have lived in New York, at least New York State, when I think it was that scoundrel Giuliani was mayor, and he adopted a zero tolerance in New York. I'm talking 15 years ago or more. And it worked. He really cleaned the streets up. I think it was Giuliani, who, as you now know, has been proven to be a complete rogue and a Trumpist. But no, we must ask Melissa because she will have lived through that.
Yes.
I mean, Washington is a very violent city, Keith. And it has a very, very, very high immigrant and Afro-Caribbean population.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's considered to be a black city, isn't it?
Yes. So we see all these images of DC and the Capitol and the White House and all that lovely stuff. But the reality is very different. Very different. No, Harry. The only country in Europe that Harry thinks is and will remain left wing, ironically, is Germany. And what Harry fears is that Putin will decide to go into Germany. And he reckons that the German government, which is left wing, because there are still so many East Germans left, the old East Germans, that it would be a pushover. That's Harry's worry. He thinks that Germany would be Putin's next target. But he also makes the point that there's no right or left wing in our governments in Britain. They are centrist.
Yes.
They're neither conservative nor socialist. I had to laugh this morning when I heard on the radio that Angela Rayner, who's under this cloud about property fraud and second homes and stuff, she's addressing a conference later today of property developers because Labour's policy is to build new towns and expand existing ones, which apparently was a promise they made last time they were in power, and they failed to do anything.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was ironic and really quite amusing that, of all people, it's Angela Rayner who's addressing that conference.
Yes.
On behalf of the Labour Party.
One of the things that bothers me enormously, and the reason that perhaps we are so brassy on Mirador is because we believe in free speech. But you know, I often wonder, instead of expanding and eating up the greenery and the landscape and so on, has anybody ever seriously considered limiting the population?
Well, China did that, didn't it? China did that.
Yes.
They were kept to, it could even have been one child per family, if not, it was no more than two. And as Harry's pointed out, as ever, China is now, it's got such a shrinking population that it's becoming a problem. Again, it just doesn't happen in Britain. people just wouldn't tolerate it. You know, with a semi-repressive regime like China, the people just obey.
Yes,
as they do in Russia or in Syria, but not here. How on earth would you prevent or limit population growth in Britain? How would you do it, Keith?
Yes, it would be very difficult, but you know, as with sort of zero tolerance, it's easy to say zero tolerance, but then you would have to think it through.
Yes.
And I wonder whether, in fact, we actually challenge our minds. I don't know that I really would like the idea of limiting population by legislation. But I mean, do we ever think of anything other than we've got to build more houses and we've got to swallow up this land and we've got to plan this sort of thing? We only think in one direction.
But that's a southern bias emphasis, because everybody comes down like I did. Everybody still comes down to London and the southeast. So you're not getting massive new builds in the West Country. You're not getting massive new builds where Mark lives. You're not getting massive builds up in certainly the far north, possibly in the northwest, because Manchester and Liverpool are pretty thriving again. It's very much a southeastern thing. And there are far too many of them. I agree with you. This area around here, it's I was going to say profligate. That's not the word. It's prolific. It's everywhere.
Yes.
Everywhere the few bits of driving I now do, there's a new build. The end of my road, the Duke of Norfolk sold some land off, and they're now building on that. The strain on the infrastructure and the roads. I mean, my God, I go on about this road near me, the Ford Road. Well, there are two developments, one near town and the one behind me. And they're not small developments, and that traffic's going to have to come onto the Ford Road. It doesn't bear thinking about, Keith.
No. Actually, tongue in cheek, I saw that there's a lovely little village called Plumpton
Yes.
here with the race course. So
Yes.
You're aware of it, you know it. And
I've been to
apparently
the
the plans call for Plumpton to be turned into a fairly substantial city. And I said, has anybody told the Queen? Because that's where she's from.
Camilla.
Yep.
Well.
She's a Plumpton. She's a Plumpton girl.
Yeah. Well, years ago, when I was joint head of Westgate Chambers, which then was in Lewes, we had 2 consecutive years at the racecourse, entertaining our solicitors like PR, which were great. The only problem was, on the second occasion, a group of us adjourned to the local pub, which is near the railway station, and a bloody great fight broke out. I mean, the fight had everything. It had tables thrown, chairs thrown. So we got out of there. But no, I like Plumpton. But, well, what could Camilla do? Queen or no queen, little bit of influence here and there, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. She would just be another objector, wouldn't she?
Yes, but I wonder if somebody who has developed a new town in Plumpton turns up at the palace to get a gong. I wonder if she would say, "On your bike."
Yes, I'm not giving you a gong.
Yeah.
Now, Keith, I'm not going to leave you completely, but joking apart, I do need a comfort break, so I'll
Yes.
just leave you for a while.
Okay. I'm going to actually see whether Mark got home, and I'll see you again in a minute. Well, forgive me while I just sent off a message to another of your favorites, Dr. Mark Maybe, who was stuck in London yesterday because of lack of crew for trains. These train people, they make almost more than the Prime Minister. In fact, some of them do in basic salary. Although I would hate to think the perks that a prime minister gets is probably as much as his salary again. But it's outrageous that we've permitted our trains to get into this particular situation. But then again, with the exception of Branson, I don't know of any English company running a train franchise, and I don't think Branson is at the moment. I think he's just reapplied, has he not, to get a franchise back again. It is total mismanagement. It's I said to this morning that management is a skill, an absolute skill, and one that I don't have. I'm a creator. I'm an activist, if you like. So I'm happy at the coalface. But when it comes to management, I just do not have the skills. That's what Mirador needs. And I think that we've found somebody that beginning to activate it is as much a problem as it is actually identifying the problems and getting people. But nonetheless, I would hope that we can take Mirador from strength to strength. John Henty and I laugh a little bit because, I mean, John is full of fun and a little imp. But one of his favorite programs is Itmar. Now, I bet you Philip doesn't even remember what Itmar was. It was a radio program during the war, and just shortly afterwards, it was with Tommy Hanley, a well-known comedian at the time, and he had a bevy of characters: Colonel Chinstrap, Mrs. Malaprop, Mona Lot, and so on. And he would, throughout his half-hour program, introduce each of these characters. And I think that we are getting very close to a real version of Itmar, because throughout the week we introduce and have on all sorts of different characters who are characters in their own right. and very interesting. And we are beginning to look a bit like a visual version and a modern version of the radio program Itmar. I'm certainly a bit like moan a lot. I'm always moaning about something, and John is the bubbly one, and so we've got our characters who crop up, and it's a wonderful a wonderful combination because it keeps us lively, it keeps us interesting, it keeps us what we is I'm told is the modern way of television without abandoning the old way. So we've got a television, we've got programs, we've got specifics, we've got things that we pursue. But by the same token, we stream, as they say. We stream. So for 3 hours, we are more or less non-stop. That's not always true. Any more than anything is always true of Mirador. We do all sorts of crazy things. And we the constant refrain from people who talk to me about our program is, we never know what the hell's going to happen next. And indeed, that's the truth. Philip, is Plumpton Racecourse is a nice little racecourse, isn't it?
Oh, it's lovely, and you feel very close to the horses and the racing. But no, I had a great time there for 2 years, apart from nearly losing my head in the scrap in the pub. I'm trying to think which of those characters you've been talking about I would be. I think I'd quite like to be Chinstrap.
Yes, I don't mind if I do.
But I think you're being a bit unfair on yourself saying that you should be moan a lot. You don't really moan. You're pretty stoical, you know.
Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up on the web, because undoubtedly it'll be there, of the whole list of characters, because those three are the only three that I remember. But believe it or not, I remember from when I was 4 or 5 listening to this program, because Hanley died, I think, right at the end of the war. So the program didn't go on for much more than that. And yet I can remember, it's clear in my mind, some of these characters coming on.
How are we spelling the name of the program?
ITMA. It's that man again it stood for.
Ah. Apparently it's a film as well.
Have you found it?
I have. Yeah, ITMA 39 to 49. Handley actually died during the 12th series, and all the programs were then cancelled.
He was central to it. It all swirled around him. I don't see how it could have gone on without him, actually.
Colonel Chinstrap, I don't mind if I do. Mrs. Mop, can I do you now, sir? The incompetent German agent, Thumph. The odd job men, Cecil and Claude. After you, Claude, no, after you, Cecil. The hawker, Alley-oop. I go, I come back. and the lugubrious moan a lot. I should be moan a lot actually, because her catchphrase was, "It's being so cheerful that keeps me going."
Keeps me going. Yes. There was Mrs. Malaprop too, I think, was there not?
Yes, I'm just looking these up. Yeah, Thumph, we've done that. The Diver. Don't forget the Diver. Every penny makes the water warmer. I'm going down now, sir.
Oh.
Cecil and Claude. We've done that. After you, Claude. No, after you, Cecil. After you, Claude. No, after you, Cecil. Cut out the etiquette. You've a big job to do. Do you want us to push your chair, Mr. Mayor? It'll need a new tyre, sire. No, I want you to go round to the lighthouse and lend a hand erecting our foaming funfair. Will there be swings and things? There'll be coconut shies, I surmise. Yes, and merry-go-rounds, you hounds. Then we'll have a deco, Sir Echo. We'll have a penneth, Sir Kenneth. Alley-oop.
I was just
Sam, Scram and Lefty. Boss, something terrible's happened. It's me Noives. They were meant to be American gangsters, Sam, Scram and Lefty. Mrs. Mop I've mentioned. Commercial Traveller. Senior So-So. Catchphrase, nothing at all, nothing at all.
Gosh, it was a very, very wide range of characters, wasn't it? Much wider than I remember.
Well, haven't got to the end. These are just the main characters. Right, yeah. Colonel Chinstrap, I don't mind if I do. A retired army officer perpetually on the lookout for a free drink. The Times commented that his voice, quote, carried the unmistakable aroma of vintage port and brandy. Didn't I meet you in Rumbellypore, sir? You did not, sir. I was never there. Then you must have a double. Thanks, I will.
It was all good stuff, wasn't it? It just, but you know, in talking about this, it reminds me of the other old staple, the Goon Show.
Yeah.
I worked with a chap who was what they called a floor manager at the BBC, and he worked on the Goon Show, and he said it was it was really the first effort at unscripted stuff. Part of it was a script, but he said that they would stand with an armful of saucers or cups, and if the programs seemed to be flagging, they would throw a cup or a plate on the floor, smash it, and it would spur Milligan and Sellers and so on to just go off at a tangent and make up funny stuff about it. Some of the histories of these comedy programs, radio programs, sort of before television took hold, were quite fascinating.
Yeah, well, of course, King Charles was a massive fan of the Goons. I never got on with them at all, I have to say. I found them individually, I found them funny. But the Goons, no, sadly. Anyway, going back to Itmar, Sophie Tuckshop, played by Hattie Jakes. Replacing a less successful character, Ella Thant. Johann Bull, a German agent trying to be English, Chief Bigger Banger of Tomtopia, Wamba Mbuja, who spoke with an Oxford accent, Luke Slippy, Harry Carey, a Japanese caller, and his compatriots bowing and scraping, Tatty McIntosh, Sam Fairfecken, hello, how are you, as if I cared, Frisbee Dyke from Liverpool, Lola Tickle, Miss Hotchkiss, oh, there's loads of them, Keith. Loads of them.
Yes. I'm sure that you're reading some of those names. There are people in the audience who would remember them and remember them fondly. But yes, 1949, you say, was the last one.
That's the year he died.
Yes. It's, wow. When you think about it, that's wow. It's not far off 80 years ago.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, 39 was when the phony war started. That finished in 45, 46. And then 3 years later, sadly, he'd gone.
Yeah.
So it must have been quite a morale booster.
It's amazing things about memory, isn't it? As I can remember being told this when I was quite little, but it didn't register at the time. But here I can actually remember some of these programs, which are sort of 80 years ago, and I can't remember what I saw on television last night.
No, well, this is not uncommon. Although I'm nowhere near your age, I'm finding that out already. I am remembering and actually dreaming about things going back years and years and years. But I can't remember what I had to eat last night.
Yeah.
You know, I think it is I mean, my father-in-law, Jackie's dad, who in his day was a very successful estate agent up in Hampstead, London. As he got older, he died in his 90s. And when he died, he did have dementia. But he didn't always have dementia. And he could remember back, the older he got, because he told me about it, the older he got, the further back he remembered. And by the time, sadly, he began to lose his marbles, he could remember when he was 3 and 4 years of age. Events, family events. Extraordinary man.
Yeah. Yes.
I must tell you this story. Again, he did have increasing dementia and began to not recognize people or think they were somebody else. In the block in which he lived was another man of a similar age who equally had a level of dementia. And our great friend, a lady called Ailsa, was their carer, their joint carer. Well, one of them had a 90th birthday party here at my house on the back terrace. Summers, it must have been Doug, because Douglas's birthday was the 29th of June, 3 days after mine. So it must have been his, or maybe they were both he and the other chap, whose name I think was John. So they were both losing their marbles. So they were there having this birthday tea with us. Well, Douglas decided that I was his dead brother Basil, right? So Douglas called me Basil all afternoon. And I just went with it because you can't dislodge it from them. You have to go with it. The other chap, who, and this is why we were all convinced, including Ailsa the carer, that he was once certainly in the Foreign Office, if not a spy, because he spoke fluent German. So we had him speaking half in English, half in German, and he decided I was his nephew. So I had all of that time, all that afternoon, being two people I never was. And when we escorted them back up to the car for Elsa to drive them back to their block of flats, the German-speaking one tried to give me a fiver. He said, "I borrowed this off you." I think his nephew was Peter. "I borrowed this off you, Peter, years ago, and I've always meant to give it you back." I said, no, John, no. You really have got the wrong idea now. It's your money. You keep it. But it was the most surreal afternoon. Most surreal.
But actually, I mean, I don't know whether it's because I really do see the glass half full most of the time. Is that those are occasions that you actually have a lot of fun at. I mean, they are unlikely to be replicated ever.
No. Well,
it's a rare moment.
They are unique. I mean, we still laugh about it. I still laugh about that afternoon, as does Jackie, and as does Ailsa when we bump into Ailsa, because both those men are dead now. But we all remember the afternoon. I mean, another great friend who now lives in Littlehampton, but lived in Arundel for years, she's a carer. I mean, she's no spring chicken herself, but she's a carer for an even older lady who, again, has increasing dementia. And once in a while, when the weather's nice, our friend Lorinda, who is the godmother of our youngest Ollie, who you've met down the screen, she'll bring this old lady round. Now, the old lady is actually very sprightly. She's called Gwen. And she can talk the hind legs off a donkey, right? So Lorinda will bring her round as much for a break. And so we can have to listen to her, not her. So Gwen will whiz her on. Most of the time she's quite lucid, but other times she isn't. And you end up sort of giggling because it is very, very funny, the stuff they come out with. But when she's lucid, she comes out with some cracking stuff. So, I mean, Jackie once asked her, "Have you ever been married, Gwen?" And Gwen goes, "Oh, no, I've never had one of those." A husband? No. I've never had one of those. Never wanted one. To which my loyal and devoted wife answered, "Good for you, Gwen." Which sums up my relationship with my wife and vice versa. No, she's hilarious. But she can never remember our names. Laurie tells us. She'll say to Laurie, "Oh, could we go and see those nice people in Arundel?" "Oh, you mean Jackie and Phil?" "Oh, is that their name?" But they're very nice people. She never ever remembers our names. It's just hilarious. You've just got to go with it. You've just got to go with it and live in their world.
Yes. Actually, memory is a strange thing. Stuart Dolby tells me that there is something called a delayed memory syndrome, which I do suffer from. For instance, I will start to talk about a movie featuring John Wayne. And I'll start off and I'll think, oh gosh, yes, I must tell this person about this movie with John Wayne. And then I'll start the story and I will forget that it's John Wayne that I'm talking about. And it'll be 2 minutes into the story. I just have to keep going when suddenly it'll pop back into my mind.
Yeah, well, I don't think, again, that's unique to you. Delayed memory recall.
Yeah.
It's called delayed recall.
Right.
And it's used to diagnose Alzheimer's. Are you sure you've got it?
Does it say that it leads to Alzheimer's?
No, it's part of the diagnosis for Alzheimer's.
Oh, yeah.
According to this.
No, I actually.
This isn't what you're describing. Sorry. What you're describing is not delayed recall. Because delayed recall involves the whole subject. So the fact, this is my analysis of it, given what I'm reading, the fact that you begin with the subject and then rather lose yourself halfway through and then it comes back again is different from what this is talking about. This is talking about forgetting an incident completely. Well, doesn't Stuart have a level of dementia?
Well, I mean, I put it down to the fact that it's just old age. Yes, I do forget the odd thing, but I mean, when you think about it, of course, is my stock in trade is talk. So I probably undertake 20 times more chat in a day than the average person. So I suppose that I forget 20 times more material. So I've never worried about it particularly, but just while we're talking about older people and some of the things that when we're having a nice chat about things that we wouldn't normally talk about this morning, which is rather nice. That's one of the things that does afflict me a little, as it were.
Yeah, well, the way they do the test is they would give you some material to remember. It could be a list of words, it could be a paragraph. And then 2 hours later, you will be asked to recall that information. And if you can't recall it, then, but later, that's the delayed recall. But that's a test. That's not what you're describing, is it?
No.
What you're describing is a self-experienced thing.
Yes.
Well, there's nothing delayed about you talking. I mean, that's all you ever do.
Well, I had to be good at something.
Have you well, yeah, that's true. Yeah, some mobility scooter driving lessons wouldn't go amiss. Has maybe been in touch?
No, he hasn't come through yet. He did say it was dependent upon him getting back. It could be that he's still stalking the platforms in London, trying to get back. He's Mark has got a fascinating project going on that is probably going to involve Mirador, and that is the establishment of a new, different type of university.
Yes, I know that. Yeah,
he's going down to London fairly frequently now because we can't set up a university until we've got government approval.
Yeah.
And I suppose I understand that, because you don't want people wandering around sort of just saying, "Oh, let's have a university." There's got to be some sort of standard. So,
well, plenty of other places do it. You know, your what you and I used to know as bog standard polytechnics. You know,
yes.
They'll start calling public toilets universities soon.
Well, I mean, after the experience with the police being mooted as every policeman having to have a degree, I rather think that they might start one in the attendance for public loos. I mean, anything is possible now. I really think that we're in a very strange era in education, and I'm very happy that we have Kit Wood from Lewis Old Grammar School on once every other week, because he is a very sensible veteran teacher who has seen a lot of changes and has his own version of the way things should go, and it puts a bit of solidarity, a bit of reality into the fact that all is not lost in our educational system.
Yeah, well, I think the most ridiculous, in parentheses, degree I've heard of lately was a girl who was telling somebody near to me, I mean, in the sense of being audible, that she got a degree in wedding management. Wedding management. I mean, good God. You know. But, well, Keith, I do have to leave you in about 2 minutes because I've got a delivery coming in just after 10:15.
It was good to see you this morning, Colonel Chinstrap.
Yeah, well, I think I'm going to call myself that from now on.
Absolutely. Now you're going to have to get yourself a little flask, because you will have to present to your fans the flask from which you will take a sip from time to time.
Yes, well, it's too early even for me at the moment. But what I find really funny is when I'm on with the professor and he spots me with a glass of wine, he goes and gets one himself. It's as if we're in his Weatherspoons together. It's really funny. All right, mate. Well, I'll try and hook up tomorrow. Wednesdays. Now, who have you got Wednesday?
I'm not sure. As we now have got such a full running order, today is a bit unusual. But I have to look at our schedule, and I'm going to get our new operating officer. One of the first things to do is to start to send out a schedule to us all, so that we all know who's on. I mean, I hate a lot of paperwork, but the fact is that as we get bigger and we get more sophisticated, keeping it in our minds, particularly in a mind that is having a struggle remembering some things, is beyond us. So I will let you know later.
Yes, I'm not asking for a schedule. I mean, you've still got to get together with Cheeseman.
Yes,
that's the first thing. Just getting together with him.
Yes. Well, I think we're going to do that online pretty soon.
You don't necessarily need maybe or me there, but I certainly remember that Cheeseman wants to have a look at the kit you're using.
Yes. Well, I think that just an initial the executive, as it were, get together, just so that we can get some sort of form going, and we know one another. So I shall apply myself to that next week. We've actually come a long way, Philip, and it's. I think the term in the commercial sense would be overtrading. We are just a bit too ambitious at the moment, and we need to calm that down, and then we can go on to the next phase.
Yeah, well, I'll wait and see what tomorrow brings. I'll have a look in and see who's on with you.
Okay.
And
I really I like the idea of regulars popping in. You know, Harry has become a regular. You become a regular. Mark's become a regular. There are one or two more that float around who pop in whenever they can. And as I say, it's a bit like Itmar, except it's reality rather than fictitious characters.
okay, well, you're monologue, so you say. I'm Chinstrap, so I'll say goodbye until tomorrow.
Right, you are. It's good to see you. There we are. Philip Meredith, a former barrister, a very successful one, head of chambers at one stage, lives in Arundel, which is a lovely, lovely little town, the seat of the Duke of Norfolk, I think. And as Arundel Castle is very historic, and was one of my favourite stories. Is that it changed hands several times in the English Civil War, and this stretch of coast was a very key battleground in the English Civil War, and we see plenty of things. And now, as let me see if we have got. I am going to. I know what I'm going to do. I played at the end of last week, episode 8 of A Bloody Past, but it needs playing again because most people wouldn't have had an opportunity to see it. So here it is. Let's. Oops. Not quite, but it will be. Okie dokie. Let us. Let us see if we. Let's see if this will work. Yes, it will. Oh, look at that. Here we go. Episode 8 of A Bloody Past.
The Bloody Past of a Tiny Town. We build this programme as a frolic down Lewis High Street. Me? Frolic? Oh, go on then, I'll give it a try. This street, indeed this town, has a lot of joy about it. If you've been following my epic journey through the town's past, you'll remember the children colourfully parading through the streets in patina. and one of the ladies behind it, Raffaella.
It's called Moving on Parade, and it's something we started 16 years ago. It started from a wish of parents to bring more art into schools because they see how much schools struggle demands of the government, and they wanted to support the school in that. So we started something called Patina, which is Parents and Teachers in the Arts.
Right.
Moving on Parade celebrates the transition for primary to secondary education of all the children in Lewis District Council. So every year we have a theme, and the theme this year is Wonders of Our World. Last year we asked the community to suggest different artists that they would like to see on the parade, and loads of suggestions came in, and we shortlisted the huge list into 16 schools, which was the amount of schools that took part last year. We had Frida Kahlo, and we had Picasso, and we had Van Gogh, and we have Giacometti, and we had Andy Warhol. So they doing illustrations and designs, and then the patina artists take all the children's idea and adapt it into a practical design that the children are actually able to make.
Then the fun and games on the River Ouse, which flows through the town. And the men of the Round Table who almost drown after organising it.
The first few hundred metres are quite torrid because from the bridges here, people hurl flower bombs and eggs and all sorts of things at you, really. But when you get past Lewis, it's quite peaceful and serene down the river, and you've got the tide to help you along as well. Last year the theme was the Rio Olympics. So again, it was quite open to interpretation. You could just take Brazilian culture or, of course, the Olympics. I actually took part last year. I duly sank in New Haven Harbour, though, unfortunately. But obviously, we put the proper safety provisions in place, and we were fished out before we were swept out into the English Channel. There's been suggestions this year that there would be pirate rafts, and people drinking rum and trying to board other people's boats, but we'll see how that happens.
The whole town then takes a trip along the High Street in November, Lewis Bonfire, the largest celebration of burning Guy Fawkes in the world. Then there's the joy of sampling the beers and ales of the town's 16 pubs. After all, there's still plenty to choose from, even though in its heyday, Lewis boasted 63 taverns. And what a contribution I've made, changing my hat 8 times, one for each episode. And I've only changed my trousers twice. But behind all this frivolity, though, there is a very bloody history. Right here on this street, people have been butchered. burned at the stake, and sentenced to death. Strangely, Lewis seems to have escaped the trauma of the Norman invasion. That happened down the road in Hastings. But it didn't take long before the predominant Saxon culture gave way to Norman governance. The castle was built very quickly, growing from a wooden fortress to this relatively small but prominent castle, within a couple of decades or so. Almost as quickly, a Cluniac priory was established. That's a French order of monks, started about 900. The priory eventually towered over the town with a huge abbey, a large campus of buildings for more than 100 monks. And hospitals, infirmaries, and medical herb gardens to boot.
It was a significant part of the town. It started small with only 4 monks, but over the course of about 400 or 500 years, the numbers swelled. The maximum number we had was probably about 100 monks. But the church, the big church that was built in the 14th century, was bigger than Chichester Cathedral. It was massive. It would have dominated the skyline in Lewes, so it was incredibly important. And it looked both ways. It looked inland because Lewes was the mother priory for other Cluniac monasteries in the UK, and it also looked towards Europe with its mother house in Cluny. We do a lot of education work with a whole range from tiny children up to adults to get them interested in different aspects of the priory. And the trustees of Lewes Priory Trust are very keen that it's always open and free access. And it's a beautiful place that everybody can come to. They can learn about the history, they can sit in our herb garden and contemplate. And we've just started a new kitchen garden which will grow vegetables. And again, this is for the community to get involved in. So it's very much based in the community of Lewes.
The priory became so dominant that servants of the prior and servants of the Lewes sheriff had a ding-dong battle in a local pub. A bit of blood was spilled that day, I suspect. But it was this place of monastic peace and religious calm that saw the first real bloodshed in Lewes. Ah, the very thought makes me thirsty. Give me a few minutes to have a pint, and I'll tell you all about it. That's better. And I've changed my hat. Now, where was I? Ah, yes, the priory. Built by the wife of the Norman lord who governed Lewes. Mrs. de Varenne set about having the priory built. The boss, King William, wasn't very keen, but William de Varenne was his brother-in-law and fought side by side with him at the Battle of Hastings. So his wife Gundrada had some pull, and she persuaded King William to let her start building the priory within 10 years of the Normans coming to Britain. And it wasn't until almost 2 centuries later that the calm of the priory was broken. You say the Battle of Lewes to most people around this country now, they glance at you with vacant eyes. They don't know what it's about. What was it about?
Well, you're right. Most people here don't know about it. What happened was Simon de Montfort and his barons were arguing with the king and his men about representation in Parliament, whereas the king just had all of his men and a lot of his French relatives in Parliament, and he was taxing the barons very heavily, and all of this money was going to the French relatives or going abroad, and the barons were not very happy about this.
And it was a pretty bloody war.
It was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. It's hard to imagine. Lewes is a little place, and on the hills around Lewes, where most of the fighting was, there were tens of thousands of people trying to kill each other. And it was hand-to-hand close combat. And you didn't often die of wounds on the battlefield immediately. You were usually whacked with a broadsword and you would die of internal bleeding, or you would, have limbs severed and die slow death, or you would die death from infection, etc.
So it was the scene of vicious fighting as the army of the barons, led by Simon de Montfort, ran riot through its saintly corridors, chasing the beaten army of King Henry III, putting thousands to the sword and terrifying the monks as they hacked their way into this sacred precinct. Imagine the terror as the soldiers broke through the doors, hacking at everyone in sight, spilling blood, holy or otherwise. Yet out of this pain and bloodshed sprang the first shoots of democracy. Not exactly one man, one vote, but enough to stop the king from calling all the shots. That same battle also prompted the town planners to make crucial changes. Lewes was a walled city, but the barons' men had sliced through it like a knife through butter. So the walls were reinforced. And a barbican was added to the castle. The barbican is the most prominent part of the castle to survive, but the walls, they're long gone. But in their day, they protected many of the institutions that lay within them. The gentle sport of bowls, played to this day as Francis Drake would have played the game. It exists on the old tilting grounds, where knights hacked at one another as part of their military training, and later entertained the ladies by jousting for cash prizes. Cyril Man has doubts about the knights cutting each other to pieces on this bit of soil. But he is certain about the history of the Bowls Club.
It goes way back to medieval times, but so far as we're concerned here, we've been playing here since 1753, and there is some evidence to suggest that in the mid-1600s there was bowls played here. And we're reputed to be the oldest society, sporting society in the world. Very unique. Firstly, the woods are unique in that most of them over 100 years old. They're lignum vitae, which is very, very hard wood. And that's the reason, of course, they've survived as long as they have. The jack is biased, which is very unusual, and the green is undulating, very undulating. There's not another green anywhere in this country, so far as we know. And it makes for a very fascinating but unique game, one that we can't play any other club because there aren't any that play like this.
St Michael's Church, almost as old as the Priory, survived. Then there was the day the French marauders tricked the prior into rushing down to Rottingdean with his army, only to double back, sail up the River Ouse and attack the Priory. Rebuffed by a few English bowmen, the frustrated French turned their attention to the town and turned it over. Then there was the Peasants' Revolt. The peasants raged across Britain, looting and burning, and they broke into Lewes Castle, but only pinched a few barrels of wine. The streets ran red all right, but this time it was wine, not blood. More seriously, Queen Mary I offered far more bloodshed. She had 17 martyrs burned at the stake for refusing to revert to Roman Catholicism. That, of course, has given rise to the biggest bonfire celebrations in the world. One Lewes citizen, though, lit perhaps the biggest bonfire of all. Tom Paine developed his anti-monarchist, anti-establishment ideas here. Then he buzzed off to America and lit the torch that saw our colonies become an independent state. Certainly, the gallows played a long and major part in the history of Lewes. At Gallows Bank, the hangman's noose and the stocks were used until the late 19th century for public punishment. the Crown Court and the prison have both seen some of the most horrendous criminals appear before it. Especially John Haig, the acid bath murderer, who a jury took just 17 minutes to convict. And who can forget a cheeky Mick Jagger ordering a takeaway from the White Hart while languishing in the prison cells? The White Hart stands like a beacon in the centre of the High Street. It was once a great coaching inn, and even today remains the centre of the town's social life. The hotel is called the Cradle of Democracy and proudly displays an original copy of the American Declaration of Independence on its walls. After all, dear old Tom Paine did a lot of thinking there, usually propping up the bar.
It seemed that he used to like to spend his social hours here and his active political discussion times here in volatile discussion with a group which I believe we thought was called the Headstrong Club, because it still meets today and they call it the Headstrong Club today, but I gather from a local historian that it was called the White Hart Dining Club. Oh. And Thomas Paine, up in our sheriff's room, the oak-panelled function room, basically plotted the American Revolution and for a struggle for independence, which resulted in the final Declaration of Independence, an authenticated copy of which we have in the sheriff's room, and he was credited with originating that. And in turn, he dubbed the White Hart Hotel as the cradle of American independence.
The hotel was host to a meeting between the Russian ambassador and a British foreign secretary in 1929. The meeting led to the resumption of diplomatic relations between Britain and Russia for the first time since 1856. And its cellar held 7 of the martyrs before they were led to their deaths at the stake. But some of the mayhem wasn't man-contrived. The plague, the Black Death, hit Lewis 3 separate times during its history. On one occasion, completely wiping out the village of Hamsey, just upstream from Lewis. Leprosy also had a devastating effect, with lepers banned from public places and forced to take communion through a so-called leper's slit. The Prince Regent frolicked through Lewis regularly. His buddies came from here, and speculation has it that he was challenged to drive a coach and 4 down this road, Keir Street. I have enough problems getting up Keir Street on my own 2 legs. And for that matter, getting down it as well. There are many other incidents that have occurred in Lewis. A disastrous Canadian raid on Dieppe in World War II started out from New Haven at the mouth of the Ouse, while Lewis itself took the brunt of many German bombing raids. And through it all, a constant from 1790 stood proudly on the riverbanks. Harvey's Brewery, the key industry of the town. The bloody high street of a tiny town. Now peaceful and calm.
Well, there you are. It's a little historical trip through Lewis. We will continue to show the episodes over a period of time, because many of you have said that they missed it the first time around, even though 2.5 million people watched it a couple of years ago. There are still lots of people who didn't think about Lewis now do. So we will, just to make sure that you get your dose of it. Well, it's been a rather loose type of program this morning, and I'm happy to say that we were able to have just a little social chat about this, that, and the other. And we'll be back tomorrow. I think that Mark maybe is still trapped in London because of the lack of crew. It's outrageous. And then they go on a strike for more money. Is the trains, like the police, like the NHS, everything is in a dreadful mess. Mainly because those people who are in charge of administration aren't administrators. They're career civil servants who are only interested in the perks. Yes, Minister prevails, and we all suffer as a result. Okay, is there anything else that we really should be we should be looking at before we go? Not really, I don't think. Yes, we'll play Like Lewis. If you like Lewis, you like Lewis. Well, there we are. That's it for today. Nice little rabbit through a couple of hours, and some people might enjoy it, and others may not. But you never know what's going to happen next. So we'll be back tomorrow, and with the usual team of villains, and hopefully we'll bring something to you that you wouldn't experience elsewhere. So let's say toodles, oodles, pip. Oh, the next quiz, by the way, is on June the 9th. Sunday, June the 9th, starting at 8 o'clock, £2 to enter, and you can make a day of it if you want to have a nice lunch as well. Sunday lunch, Sunday roast here, pretty damn good. Right, you are. That's it for today, and we'll be back. We'll be back 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Ta-ra.